Hello everybody, welcome back to episode 103 of the Podcana podcast. This week we have a lot of different topics to talk about. Most notably, we're going to be breaking down the recently announced Worlds format. So that's going to be the core constructed format as well as the new super sealed format that was announced. I'm also going to briefly talk about my set champs experience this past weekend. It was my very last set champs that I could play within Ireland, and I managed to take it down, so I was very, very happy. It was nice to have one last hurrah with all of my, Irish Lorcana family. It was a really, really great time. And there was a comment that was posted in their building section that we're going to get into that actually also highlights an infinite combo deck that's been talked about amongst the community. And before we even started the pod, Moyen was like, oh yeah, I've been testing it out. So it's going to be I kind of looked at it, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be another meme deck. And Moyen's like, no, I was actually trying it. So we've actually have a little section dedicated to that deck as well. But before we get into things, Moyen, how has your past week been within Lorcana? Have you been doing any testing? I know you're playing against Zan tonight, right?
Yeah, so this is a big match. But at the same time, it is still set 7.
Sure.
With a deck that I kind of built to beat Artabax, which it did. But now I've been testing the matchup quite a bit against Zan's Red Blue. And because I'm on the play, it actually seems kind of playable. But definitely seems like not a great matchup for me. I didn't necessarily expect Red Blue to make it to the finals because I only really expected DKP to play Red Blue, and then Kurt to expect DKP to be on Red Blue.
Sure.
So I expected Kurt to just play something that beats DKP, which he didn't do. He bought Amber Steel, which I found very, very surprising, but he still managed to beat DKP. But the only problem with it is that Zan was on Red Blue, which I didn't really expect, and he was able to defeat Artabax. And I would have much rather played Artabax again because my deck was very much built towards the green-purple mirror. But yeah, I'm looking forward to our match later today.
Sure, yeah. It should be a great match indeed. Before we jump into things, we're going to hop into our Spilled Ink section. Again, this is our listener question section. If you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to pop a comment down below. The first one is from Martin Lorcana, a good friend of mine from my locals. Says, congrats for the win at locals, champ brother Kawa. Green, yellow didn't see a lot of changes within the set 7 meta. How would you see the deck with the small changes in set 8 performing? I was actually talking to Martin about this weekend, saying oh, maybe I would include this card, change this card. And the only main one is the one I talked about in the podcast already, which is the 8 cost Inkable. I don't even know the name of the card, but it's the Sing Together one that allows you to bounce 2 chosen characters with 3 strength or less. Of course, you can target your own ones or you can target your opponent's ones. But I could see that as a 1 or 2 of within the deck. It helps you out against some character cards that are a little bit trickier to beat when maybe you say you have an Under the Sea, but you don't have a Kita or you don't have a Painting. So I might experiment with it a little bit, but I really can't see more than a 1 or 2 of that card being included within the deck. I think basically what just happens with yellow-green now is the deck changes with how the meta changes most of the time in terms of, okay, if there's more sharks and stuff in the meta, maybe we play, some more World's Greatest Criminal Mind. And not only sharks, right? If there's the big green steel Pete's, we play some more World's Greatest Criminal Minds, stuff like that. So just a few different tech options depending on how the meta goes. And besides that, yeah, I honestly think the deck's going to stay the same for the most part. The only other new inclusion I saw was I think it's a new chip card, which is a 4-cost Inkable 3/2, which just says when you play this, your opponent discards a card. So it's the same as a Daisy Duck, except it's a 3/2 rather than a 2/3. So you could say in a sense it's better because maybe it dodges all of this Ruby removal, but then since it's a 3/2 and not a 2/3, you can't bounce it back to your hand with Muses. So those are probably the only changes I see, but I honestly still think that, and it's proven to be within this meta where people thought it was it's just the same deck. It only plays cards from sets 1 to 4. I think it will still be quite a decent deck within set 8, even with minimal card changes. I think, especially with players who are as experienced on the deck as they are. Most, I have to say as well, I've seen players like No I'm Not, who's, famous for playing red blue and famous for playing red purple and has been playing a bit of red blue lately. He's been playing green yellow a lot and he's been performing very, very well with it. So it's nice for me to see other really well-known experienced players take the deck, put in the time, and also show that they can perform with the deck, so it's not just the people who've been on the color combination for ages, right? People can pick it up and learn it and perform with it pretty well. The next comment is from Darth Vader Zim. They say, I'd love to hear your opinions on Rhino Power Hamster. It seems like such a beefy body that will usually demand a 2-for-1. It can also be a great singer. Moyen, would you be able to read out this card for our audio listeners, if possible, please?
Of course. So Rhino is a 4-cost inkable character. It says Rhino Power Hamster Shift 2. And it's a 4/3 quest for 2 in the dueling colors of Amber Steel.
Mm-hmm.
Its ability reads Epic Ball of Awesome. While this character has no damage, he gains resist +2. And yeah, I also think this looks quite strong for like aggressive Amber Steel decks. We've had some like shift on 2s in the past. We've had the Queen, that's also like the Sigma 5, which was its biggest upside.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, seemed to be a little bit lackluster. We've had like the Mulan, that's a shift to 4-drop. That was never really quite good enough. But the Rhino has a much better stat line with the resist +2. And it's not so easy to damage it to get rid of the resist +2 at the stage of where Rhino Power Hamster can come down. To me, I wonder a little bit like, how happy am I to play this for 4 ink? That's very important for me to evaluate this card. Especially considering that the 1-drop Rhino, that's the shift base, is only a 1/2, so also not a great card for me to be including in my deck just to enable the Rhino shift on 2. But I think especially if it turns out I'm actually kind of happy paying 4 ink for this as well, and on top of that, I have the shift on 2 line where I can quest quite aggressively, or maybe just flood the board turn 1, turn 2, and then shift this on 3. That's also a decent line. I do think this is one of the strongest cards from the set, probably.
Yeah, me too. I can't believe I kind of missed this one. I guess sometimes so many, pools of cards are being thrown at you that you can kind of miss one. But yeah, I think this is really good. There's a card that myself and you've joked about a little bit more, and many of the people who've played card games might know this reference. But there's the idea of the 4-cost 4/5 known as Yeti, Shieldwind Yeti within Hearthstone. It's a Yeti. It's a Yeti on 2, basically.
It's a different Yeti.
It's a different Yeti. It doesn't have 5. It doesn't have 5 willpower. But like you said, at the early stages of the game, it's not very easy to deal 3 damage to this, so that it's then exposed and it's weak. So yeah, I think this is a pretty interesting card. And yeah, I think I agree with you in the sense that this is particularly strong in a more aggressive version of Amber Steel, which honestly right now, even with current builds of Amber Steel, I think the ones that I struggle with the most, and obviously depends on the deck that you're playing, but any Amber Steels that play like Daisies, Smees, like Lawrence, but even like Piglet still being around, like if you get a couple of Piglets off, it's really, really hard. By the time you're trying to like claw the game back, they're already on like 15 plus lore, and they can just like finish the game pretty easily. And now I'm even thinking about Amber Steel in the context of if you start to replace Lawrence with this new Lady card, right? The 3-cost inkable 2/2 with an Amber, and then suddenly you can play Lady like and a Piglet, or Lady and a Smee. Like, that's a lot of pressure you're putting then onto the board. So I think this card probably fits well into that shell of Amber Steel, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think in general that shell kind of got a lot of new additions with like the Lady, now these Rhinos, and I think even maybe a single copy of something like a Desperate Plan could make it into a list like that. Desperate Plan being the 3-cost uninkable action that says if you have 0 cards in hand, draw 3, and if you have non-zero cards in hand, you can like discard X to draw X. But because of that, the card gets very useless when you draw multiples of them. When you draw like a dog and a Desperate Plan, okay, that's not great, but you can still play the dog and get rid of the Desperate Plan. But I think drawing multiples of Desperate Plan would really, really hard. But still, maybe just to like have more consistent, have this type of effect more consistently to be able to flood the board and replenish more often. I could see a Desperate Plan making it into a list like that too. So I think that like Amber Steel aggressive dog type list got a lot of good new tools.
For sure, yeah. The next comment is from RS Tricky, and they say, what is your thought on the new OTK Amber Amethyst deck next set? You draw your whole deck in one turn with an infinite combo and gain 20 lore in the same turn. So I replied saying I saw it on Twitter, And I said, it looks funny, but how consistently it can be done will be the real question. But with more tutors in the future, etc., it could be at least a bit more of a consistent meme deck, is what I initially said. Then Moyen hops on before the podcast, like, yeah, I've actually been testing this deck. So let's switch over to the slides so we can actually talk about the deck.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've only playtested this for like a few hours, but it's been able to get to that stage more often than I thought. And then at that stage, you could say, okay, what is that stage that you need to get to?
Let's break down the combo for any viewers who are unfamiliar with this, if that's okay.
That makes sense. Okay, so the combo kind of resolves around the new Monstro, which is an inkable Amethyst 8-drop character. It's a 6/8 that costs for 2, and it has Rush. But the important part about it is its ability, which says you can choose and discard a card to re-ready him, but then he can't quest. So then, okay, at the worst, like, you can kind of see him as like a Scar in a way, but you need to discard cards to re-ready him a couple of times. So you can deal with the board rather well. But when you combine him with Donald Duck, which is an 8-drop inkable character in Amber, which is a 4/8 quest for 2, which says when you play this character, all of your other characters, I think, gain an exert ability. That's exert to draw.
Yes.
So let's imagine we have 8 ink, we put down the Monstro, maybe we deal with something. Maybe if we are scared of it getting traded back into, we even re-ready it by discarding a card. Okay, it sticks around for a turn. Now what you can do is, and all you really need to have for this is a few specific cards left in your deck and a Donald Duck in hand. And at that point, if you have enough hand size, which we'll get to a little bit later, you can just play the Donald Duck. And now this Monstro can cycle through your entire deck because you can exert him to draw a card. And then discard that or another card to re-ready him. And you can kind of do this repeatedly until your deck's empty. So what's the point of emptying our deck this quickly? It enables a very, very strong combo. At first, I wasn't even sure, like okay, so I saw this Monstro Donald Duck combination to draw your deck. I was like, okay, but how do you win with this? And there's like the two main ways that jumped up would either be like this OTK combo. It's not really OTK, I guess, because you kind of need to set up a Monstro, but people call it OTK. So this OTK combo that we're going to talk about in a bit. Or the other way was just, what if you just included like a few Churner box, and being able to cycle through a deck would mean you can play the Churner box, shuffle those characters back into your deck. You just do it all over again, play another Churner box. Maybe if you play something like Bare Necessities in your deck, you can cycle through that, get rid of the answers and just make a big board and deal with their answers. But the OTK combo is much harder to beat because it doesn't just get beaten by removal, but as soon as you get to it, you do just win the game. So when you have an empty deck, then you can use Monstro to sing "We Know the Way" a couple of times on very, very specific targets. We know the Way is a 3-cost inkable song that says, choose a card from your discard and shuffle it into your deck. Then reveal the top card of your deck. If it is the card with that name, you get to you may play it for free, otherwise put it into your hand. And with this, you can use your Monstro or any other character that's stuck to sing "We Know the Way" on Ellen a Day. And this way get an Ellen a Day into the play without spending ink. Ellen a Day is a character that basically says when you play a song, gain a lore.
Yep.
And as soon as you have this in play, you can then cast another "We Know the Way." Hopefully also you will be able to sing it, otherwise the combo gets very expensive. But then when you sing the "We Know the Way," you can target one of your other "We Know the Ways, and then it will shuffle that onto your deck. And shuffle, it doesn't really shuffle it, because if your deck's empty, you kind of just put it.
You just place it there, yep.
As your deck. And it will always hit a "We Know the Way," and then you can cast that "We Know the Way" to choose the other "We Know the Way" that you just played. So they can just cycle themselves, which usually wouldn't do anything, but with the Ellen a Day on the board, gains you lore until you have 20, because the game ends. But it would be able to gain you infinite lore. So overall, that's the groundwork, that's the combo. And what surprised me about it is Amber Amethyst isn't. It's actually kind of decent at getting to 8 ink without losing the game. Especially because it doesn't need to be 8 ink. With every lantern that you get out, you can kind of cheat the Monstro Donald Duck a few turns earlier. So you can get to the combo a little bit quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part that surprised me, or positively surprised me, is the Monstro isn't that easy to remove. Of course, there's some answers that will always hit it, no matter how much HP it has, no matter if it's ready or not, like Let It Go, Hades, World's Greatest Criminal Mind, stuff like that. But outside of that, you can often leave up a very, very beefy Monstro, and you don't need to deal with. You don't like your game plan is completely different. You don't need to deal with their board in a way where you need to win the long game. No, you just need to survive until you get this off. You don't need to quest for a lot, or you don't need to quest at all if you think you can manage to get to this. And then when you do get to this, the other part about the combo is so you need to cycle to 2 We Know the Ways. So with us playing 4 We Know the Ways, we can't afford to ink more than 2 We Know the Ways. That's one restriction we have. And we need to have a Donald after a Monstro stuck. And we can't afford to ink all our Ellen a days. Because without Ellen a day, you can cast infinite We Know the Ways, but you don't gain any lore while doing so. But the deck can fight for board quite well, because it is not built to aggressively quest. It's kind of just built to draw enough cards so that you can continuously ink and deal with opposing boards relatively well, that you can set up this Monstro combo. So the deck is very low on stuff that would quest for a lot, and very high on stuff that can actually trade very well, like Peter Pan, Iago, Crab, and Fox, like all of the good Amethyst tools we know and love. And this deck list might, of course, or will very likely change, and it might not even make the meta, but this is like the closest, I think, to a viable combo deck we've had in a very long time. And maybe in the end we will play 4 Donald to just make it even more consistent that you also have the Donald when a Monstro does stick. And maybe you want to play a few extra 2-drops. This current version doesn't play 2-drops outside of Lantern because 2-drops in Amber Amethyst are a little bit lackluster. And the Lantern also is so anti-synergetic with 2-drops, where if you have the Lantern, you don't really need a 2-drop this game. But you might still want to play some inkable 2-drops for every time where you'll miss Lantern.
Sure.
Also, all of the combo pieces in this deck are inkable. So your deck's not like full of these uninkable slots that kind of make your deck very bricky. And you play so many of all of them that it's not like as soon as you draw a combo piece, you have to hold it into your hand. You can kind of ink. You can still ink quite freely in this deck.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to note is that this deck is generally built with just a lot of card draw in it as well. Like naturally within the deck, you've got the Churnabogs, you've got the Diablo, you've got the Merlin. That will just help you get to those combo pieces as well. You've also got the Rapunzel. Yeah, I could see like 1 or 2 pieces potentially changing, but the general idea is there. And yeah, I still have to try it myself, because I was surprised when you said, oh, it's easier to pull off than you would think. And then it's also not as easy to, like, if this deck does become quite good, say for example next set, you can at least I feel like you can't just hold a specific piece of any of these removal cards in your hand quite easily. Like the easiest one is, sure, it's World's Greatest Criminal Mind because it's the cheapest, but like if it's like a Let It Go or a Hades, you have to get to the Hades because it's unlinkable, and then for the Let It Go, it's like you never really just want to hold that card in your hand, I feel, you know what I mean? So I do agree with you that when the monster comes down, it's not that easy to remove it. And then in combination, if you just play Lantern, like, I don't know, maybe you could even play well, if you play this specific card I'm going to mention, then you get into more uninkable territory, right? But you could play the Amber Gaston that makes a character cheaper to play, so you get the monster out earlier, which means it's then harder for your opponent to remove it potentially. Or you even just play like the 3-cost Dock, which is also basically like a lantern on a body. So there's options, right? There's definitely more options you could test out to maybe add into the deck.
Yeah. But the one thing I think I forgot in my monologue is to pull the combo off, you need 2 We Know the Ways, or if you have enough ink, you can also just like hard cast an Ellen and play 1 We Know the Way on another one that's in your discard. But if you want to sing 2 We Know the Ways, you also need to have the cards to ready it. So kind of when you're at the stage where your deck's empty, what you will need to have in hand is like, okay, imagine you exert the monster to draw the last card in your deck. So now you need to discard 1 card to ready him. You need to sing 1 We Know the Way to get the Elendil in play. Then you also need to discard another card to ready him, and you need to sing the other We Know the Way. So at the stage where your deck's empty and he's exerted, you need like 4 cards. At the stage where he's like ready and your deck's empty, you need 3 cards in hand, 2 of them being We Know the Way. So just be mindful of that, but generally this is a very, very easy thing to accomplish, because if after your monstro on your Donald turn, if you stuck any other characters on the board, all of them can also exert to draw a card, and that will provide you enough hand size. Or if you have any friends on the other side left in the deck, you can kind of just use monstros to sing a friends, re-ready him to by discarding 1. By doing that, you go like +1 in hand size and get around it that way.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the combo deck. Feel free to try it out. I mean, I would like to build this. I mean, listen, as people know, I'm moving to Berlin soon. I'm bringing a lot of my gear that I can record in-person stuff, so maybe you guys will see some more in-person games with myself and Moyen trying out wacky builds like this, or just other fun stuff. Like, I don't know, let us know down below in the comments, but if we can get enough of the cards to do it, I would love to do that Worlds format of myself versus Moyen on the channel, where we bench a deck, we present the ink tokens, we play it out. That I think would be very, very cool. So let us know if you want to see that in the future. Okay, so our last comment from this building section is from Mark. They say, if there aren't any major reprints in the next set, do you think there will be any color pair / dueling cards that will be significantly better in the post-rotation metagame? Good question. Off the top of my head, without really thinking about it, nothing comes to mind immediately. But we've been talking about a lot of these general things for the past few weeks when it comes to, set rotation of reprints. There's going to be less card draw in the meta, besides some of the stuff that we've seen from sets 5 to 8. Like now we see, we know there's Dock, we know there's Beyond the Horizon and stuff like that. So that's kind of, but like comparatively, we're probably not going to have Friends. The Hiram package is gone, right? And then also when it comes to removal, a lot of the strength-based removal within Ruby will probably go if we don't see Big Sisu, if we don't see Brawl, stuff like this. So, like general thoughts on what you think that initial... I think we've initially said already, right? It was like, oh yeah, sure, you just build a couple of aggro decks and you'll probably do pretty well at the start of the set 9 meta, which is probably true. But do you think there's anything that you would like to experiment with if all of this stuff, if you knew 90% of the removal stuff is going, most of the draw isn't going? It's a hard question, I know.
I think the biggest factor you've kind of already mentioned, which is with the strength-based removal leaving, there's a lot of stuff that's like a lot of good low strength characters that never really saw too much play. I think they could definitely get a lot better than they ever used to be. What set's Perdita from?
The 1/6?
Yeah.
It's set 3.
Oh, okay. A card like that would get a lot better.
If it gets reprinted, we don't know. Like that's an example of a card I think is exactly what I was talking about. That I'd like to see cards reprinted that like had some potential, but a certain factor of the metagame just completely made it pretty much unplayable. But now it has the chance to really be able to shine. So that's an example of a card that I would love to see reprinted.
Yeah. So I think cards like that could get a lot better. Like every time you when we went to a card, like when we went to evaluate new cards, and we said like, oh, yes, it could be good if it sticks around for a turn, but it gets banished by everything, by Brawl, Medusa, Sisu, and then I think those cards maybe they get that time now.
Yep, yeah. Only time will tell, but yeah, we've got one more set and then rotation is going to happen. Yeah, so that's this building section. Again, thank you guys so much for all of your comments. Be sure to leave a comment down below on this week's episode of the podcast if you want to have it featured in next week's episode. Before we jump in to talk about the Worlds format, I'm going to quickly brush over my Set Championship experience from this past weekend. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, this is myself with my champion playmat surrounded by my friends, Prince John, Diablo, Ariel, and the Muses. And I also have Martin in this image as well. Martin is a very good friend of mine. He does a lot with Lorcana League Italia. If you guys have seen any of that, I'm pretty sure that they did a lot of coverage of the Lorcana Ravensburg event, the recent one within Germany, in Italian. So Martin's done coverage and casting and stuff like that. So very, very good friend of mine. I beat Martin in the top 8. He was playing Ruby Amethyst. And I think both games I beat him, I went Prince John on 3, Prince John on 4, and then on turn 5 I did You've Forgotten Me to draw 4 cards. And then even in the semi-final, one of my plays was I did Prince John, Prince John, Prince John against the Ruby Amethyst player, and they had like the Shift Sisu set up. I actually did a slight misplay that didn't cost me the game, but ultimately within that turn I cast a You've Forgotten Me, and then I cast a Sudden Chill as well. So within one turn I drew 9 cards with my Prince Johns. I drew 6 from the You've Forgotten Me, and I drew 3 from the single Sudden Chill. So it was pretty filthy. That's actually a strategy if you guys are curious to play my Amber Emerald deck. Against the slower decks, you can get some value with these Johns. And also just building up a board of Johns, like you need to remember, they're so uninteractable that you can just take your time. As long as your opponent isn't aggressively questing, even just playing a few Johns kind of sets you up for your Under the Sea turn. So that was a strategy I used that actually helped me a lot. So I'm going to move on to the next slide just to show the list off to you guys. It's nothing spectacular. It's pretty much the same type of list you've been seeing for the past while. Notable thing is I've got the 2-2 split between Ursula and Sir Hiss. Honestly, I'm probably just back on all 4 Sir Hiss now if I'm playing the deck again. It's like this balance to have, like, oh, if there's some steel matchups, the Ursula's okay, but against the steel matchups you don't really want to be playing the 1 for Ursula. You want to be playing the 1-3 that discards a song anyways, so it never feels that bad. And then the Sir Hiss, when there is no steel base removal, is just so strong. So I think personally I'm back on the 4 Sir Hiss, but the splits are fine. If you do a 2-2 split, if you do a 3-1 split, it's fine. Got the 1 World's Greatest Criminal Mind in there for any of the Maui Sharks, and also the Green Steel Peats. I was very fortunate that I didn't face what's known as a traditional Green Steel in my set champs. There was one there that I just kept luckily evading, but I played against the Green Steel in the finals, but it was a very aggressive one. They had like Merfolks, 2-cost Flynns. They even played Fred, the 1-drop Fred that when it gets challenged against 2 lore. But luckily, I built up to like a Muses and Under the Sea to win out over them the past 2 times. And you can also see that there's no Lucifer in this deck. Lucifer is a card I definitely put in and out. You could take out Strike a Good Match and put in Lucifer if you wanted to, but I just felt like Lucifer it's the one card that could actually brick my hand in the opener at times. So I didn't really fancy that too much. And the 2 Cricky, Cricky saved my life so much in this deck, especially against locations, against Amber Steels playing daisies on turn 1 or going like Daisy. That's really terrifying. So there was a time where I even kept a Cricky in my opening hand against an Amber Steel player, and if I didn't, I would have lost the game. So general Amber Emerald discard stuff. As I said earlier, I don't think too much is going to change with this deck, but it's a fun time for me, probably not a fun time for my opponent. But yeah, that was my Set Champs experience. So jumping into the Worlds format, this was recently announced last week, just after we posted last week's podcast. So they're calling this Triple Deck Constructed. So breaking it down for you without here's all the info on the screen that you guys can see, but breaking it down, you bring 3 decks. Each of the decks has to contain 2 inks. They can't repeat. So you're basically using all of the inks within Lorcana. Your opponent has the opportunity to bench or ban one of your decks so that they don't have to play against that. And then both players basically play a best of 3 where they have to win with both of their decks. So if I chose like Ruby Sapphire, Emerald Steel and Amber Amethyst, and my opponent banned Ruby Sapphire. I have to win an Amber Amethyst, and I have to win a Green Steel. And that's basically it. This is known as Conquest format primarily, at least in my experience from the game Hearthstone. Hearthstone's esports scene had this, and it's still, I'm pretty sure it still has it. It's had it for years. And before we jump into the specifics of the format, the one thing I want to say is I personally think this is a really cool way to showcase players' experience, because it's not only going to be, player skill level, because it's not only going to be a player that's all like, I don't know, like they're known for playing red blue, or like for example I'm known for playing amber emerald. They just play that the whole time and they win. That's also fine if that was the format, but it gives us an opportunity to see players on other deck lists, and then there's the skill of choosing how you're going to construct your decks, what decks you're going to bench. I think this format works really well for this amount of players that we have, which is 28 I think within Worlds. Obviously, I think this format would be atrocious if it was like a large-scale format, because, okay, like first of all, can most of the player base afford, 3 competitive decks across all 6 inks? Probably not. If you want, yeah, of course, some people can, but imagine this in an absolutely massive like 1,000, 2,000 player event. It would take ages. It would be very, very messy. There's room for error, but I think to showcase, like, player skill level within the first World Championship, I'm actually pretty happy with this particular format. So before we jump into what we think would be our preferred, ink pairings, I want to pass it over to you, Moyen, and hear about your experience and your thoughts on this format in general. But you played a lot of this format within Hearthstone when you competed, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, this format, I think mostly it just works. It has some flaws, but I think there's a lot of things that it does very well. I think it tests you being able to pilot lots of different decks, but it also tests your deck building skills a lot more than a single deck format ever could.
Mm-hmm.
Because now suddenly you're not just building a deck to be okay against everything, but here they call it benching. I think in a lot of games it's called banning. With the benching decision in mind, you can build your decks a little bit differently for the expected field, because now you can kind of like eliminate a deck from the expected field, or an in combination. You could say, okay, all of my decks are bad against Ruby Sapphire. I'll bench Ruby Sapphire.
Mm-hmm.
But that also means I can build my decks, like I can include decks in my lineup that would just be very bad against it, like Ember Steel. Or the decks, and in Ember Steel, I don't need to tech for it, so maybe I can build my deck a little bit differently. I don't need to play Criminal Mind, something like that. I think it does a lot of these things very, very well. I mean, there's a few flaws. I think one of the biggest flaws competitively is the queue order. So there is no, unless there's patterns to be exploited, there's no advantage or disadvantage of queuing either deck first, but whichever one both of them, because both of them choose simultaneously, whichever one both of them choose has significant impact on your chances to win the match, because it might just be that your deck has one very good and one very bad matchup after the benching phase, and you randomly hit the good one and you win it, and so you never have to play the bad one, or you hit the bad one and then their deck already goes to that your other deck would have been very good against. So there's some variance in that, but mostly I think that variance is okay, because at the same time the format still tests both deck building skill and also the skill of piloting those decks very, very well. And then with you have to play all colors. I'm slightly conflicted, because I like when that people have to kind of like, people will kind of be tested on every single ink a little bit. So like they really have to go out of their comfort zone a little bit. And while I think if you one trick one deck and you win like a DLC, good for you. I think that's great. But I think I like the idea of our future first world champion will probably be a player that is more than that is able to, like, or at least now with this in mind, they will train a lot of different decks, and they will be able to pilot like all the different ink combinations decently well. And I like the idea behind that. Why do I say I'm conflicted? I also think because we only have six ink colors, and you have to play all 6 of them, and some of them right now have always been and will probably also be in after set 8 meta has established itself, be weak with most colors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll get into that a little bit in the next slide, but I think what that leads to is kind of like limiting your options to build a lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, maybe testing the deck building skill a little bit less, because there isn't even that many options. And so there isn't still, even with 3 decks, there isn't that much room for creativity once we get into analyzing the format a little bit deeper.
Sure. I think that's quite an interesting point that you make, because yeah, it actually is interesting. I haven't really thought about this, but if some of these ink combinations that we kind of know to be not very good at the moment, they're like pretty much unviable, if they were a bit stronger or like actually had a place within the meta, then suddenly this opens up a lot of different combinations and pairings and stuff, right? Because I think a lot of the combinations that we're about to showcase in the next slide, you can say, well, if you wanted to play like these 2 very strong decks, then you're left with a very weak one. And you don't want to be in a situation like that, especially in like, you know, the World Championship where, I've got 2 great decks. I win with my great deck and I have to win with a deck that's, you know, loses to everything or loses to most things. So speaking of that, we're going to move over to the next slide. And we're going to show off the best ink pairings for the Worlds format. So we're going to start off with what we would consider to be the obvious choice / probably the choice that most players would pick. That it's clear that all of these decks are quite strong. So we've got Ruby Sapphire, Amber Steel, and Emerald Amethyst. The bench here would be Ruby Sapphire, and we'll explain our theory behind that. And for the target, we say, okay, what's this aiming to beat? We're saying it's okay versus everything, because all of these decks are known to be good decks. So, Moyen, do you want to break down the thought of this in general and why maybe we think this is the most obvious choice, or why we think most players will pick this?
Yeah. So I'm gonna have to be a bit careful, I guess, about how deep we go into it, because we could talk about this for a very long time.
Sure.
But in general, for conquest strategies, I think there's like 2 widely accepted known strategies that you can differentiate between. One of them is you just play good decks that don't have that don't have a lot of weaknesses, and then you won't, like, you will be okay against everything. You won't. There was no 3 decks that you really combination of 3 decks that you really struggle against too much. But on the other hand, you also won't be great against anything. And that's kind of this strategy. The other strategies would also be, if you expect a deck to be like featured in most lineups, you could try to come up with 3 decks where all of them are very good against one of these decks that you expect to be played a lot. And then it's okay that your decks have weaknesses, because as soon as your opponent has deck X in their lineup that you're very good against, you can just leave that open. And if you beat that deck twice, that's all you need to win the series. But okay, with this one, I would say in general in Conquest, the most important part is to have your weakest deck be as strong as possible. Because your weakest deck in your 3 decks can really be exploited. It will not be benched. And if there's a lineup that has like pretty good matchups into it, you might not be able to get it through, even if you get 2 chances on it. And so I think a lot of thought of the lineup building should go into, how do I improve my weakest deck by the most? How do I make sure my weakest deck isn't really that weak? So the first thing I would do if I was to build a lineup is I would look at some colors that aren't really flexible, so they don't really have a lot of good color pairings. I think most notably it would probably be Amber.
Yep.
I think Amber Steel is a very, very good deck, and even Amber Emerald is a pretty good deck. It's a little bit more niche, but it's also a very good deck.
Sure.
Outside of that, I think every other Amber color combination is a little bit niche. We talked about the Monstro OTK earlier. If that deck ends up being viable, sure, you can play that, but like generally Ruby Amber, Emerald Amber, Emerald Amber, yes, but Ruby Amber,
Sapphire Amber, yeah.
Sapphire Amber, like they don't really hold up. They never did, and I don't think they do now. So we have to protect Amber, and as soon as you say, okay, if Amber has to be paired with Steel or Emerald, it doesn't really leave that many options for the other decks, because there's another deck or ink, I think, that doesn't really have too many good combinations, and to me that's Emerald. Especially if you say, like, okay, I pair Amber with Steel, then suddenly Emerald Steel is no longer an option.
Exactly.
And then outside of Emerald Steel, I think, okay, Emerald Sapphire exists. Ruby Emerald's not really great. I think the only really like overall good ink combination that's then left would be Emerald Amethyst, and that also leaves up Ruby Sapphire. So I think this lineup that's Ruby Sapphire, Amber Steel, Emerald Amethyst, kind of is where you get just by process of elimination if you try to protect the weaker ink colors.
That's a great explanation. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I hope most of our audience understand that. So even just you talking through there, it's like, yeah, it does make a lot of sense, because you want to play the best deck with the weakest color, if that makes sense, as possible, without making one of your decks absolutely like unplayable then. So I'm going to move on to my choice, and I think you actually mentioned a lot of the things that I was going to say about my lineup. So I opted for Ruby Sapphire, Amber Emerald, and Amethyst Steel. So the reason I've said I want to bench either Emerald Steel or Amber Steel is the same reason that you said kind of there, Moyen, is actually Steel seems to only really be comboed with these two colors most commonly, right? Like you've got Blue Steel, which unless kind of the Kiwi deck comes out in force next set, I still think that it's only really going to be Emerald Steel and Amber Steel. So therefore, your opponent's going to choose one of them. Then you can bench one of them depending on what the lineup is, and your target is going to be red blue, because I think it's very much fair to say, if we're doing this ink distribution correctly, that red blue is going to be a common choice a lot of the time, because as soon as you go like red purple, which I know is a very other popular deck, then suddenly you have to pair Sapphire with either Amber, Emerald, or Steel. And, you know, we just said Amber Sapphire is not great. Amber Emerald is like kind of a deck, but not really. And then Sapphire Steel, sure, if you have to play it, maybe some players that have a preference for that have a preference for that deck could play it. But I think the obvious choice is it's going to be red blue, because it's a very, very powerful deck. And then, you know, you can kind of then see the predicted colors after that. I think that if you target red blue, you've got Amber Emerald, which honestly in both versions, I mean, the one I'd play is still the discard song one, because I think that targets the DKP version of red blue very, very well. It's definitely weaker to like the general control build version. But you need to remember as well, especially moving into set 8, we're not just going to have the Amber Emerald discard package. We're going to have the Churna Dogs package, which is getting a lot of really good cards as well. Now, I would say from games I've watched over the weekend, which of course that's a very small sample size, it's very, very close, but like DKP Red Blues can definitely win out against Trinidad, because they can just kind of put down the Maui Shark, farm the Pirate's Life over and over again, and that'll kind of keep the deck at bay. But it's still a tight matchup if you don't get down to that stage. And then on the Amethyst Steel side, if I know that my Steel opponents, my opponent's Steel deck is going to be benched, I feel like I can build my deck a lot more aggressively, that it's not prone to so much removal. So say, for example, okay, I really want to beat red-blue. I'm going to go for like one-drop Maleficence. I'm going to go for high questing, kind of like straight-up aggro strategy, knowing that your aggro cards aren't going to be dealt with as easily. Of course, red-blue has general removal. It's got the big Sisu, but your plan is to win the game before they even get there. And then when it comes to the red-blue deck, you basically just want to build a red-blue deck that's better in the mirror match, which then sure might leave you weaker to whatever other deck that they're going to bring. But if you can win out against the red-blue and then your other decks are pretty decent against, that's I think where that actually gets tricky, is if you build all of these decks, they're too good against just red-blue, and then as soon as you beat the red-blue, whatever deck is left, you might struggle against. But because all of the Steel is gone, if you are on just like Churna Dogs and Amethyst Steel aggro, you got a pretty decent chance of beating whatever the other deck is, right? It'll be a combination of Amethyst and something else. So yeah, that's my explanation. I hope that makes sense, but I think that my choice is not like, I don't know, I kind of came into the thing, oh yeah, of course, I'll just pick it because I like Amber Emerald, but it seems like like the strategy makes sense to me, right? So, all right,
so
go ahead.
What this also accomplishes, kind of like building a coherent lineup that also doesn't force you to go too far out of your comfort zone, because I think both Purple Steel and Amber Emerald are both decks you've played.
Oh yeah, they were like probably my most played. The first DLCs I played Amethyst Steel, and then now my preference,
Actually, the funniest part is, of course, this is your lineup, because like Red Blue wasn't part of your personal collection for.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. So just ban the deck instantly, bench the deck.
It was like Red Blue, the colors red and blue were paired for you, of course. So of course you played the other ones.
Yep, of course.
Yeah. So for the third lineup, this is Monstro's choice. That's not really my choice.
Not Moyen's choice. Definitely not Moyen's choice. No.
I think so. There's two prerequisites under which this lineup would make sense. One is the Monstro deck is actually okay, and two is Emerald Steel is very good in the format. And if if Amber Amethyst is okay enough, what that enables you to do is have both Ruby Sapphire and Emerald Steel as your other two decks. And I think both of those could have a very, very good standing in the meta. And then you can kind of use your benching decision. That sounds so weird to me to say bench, not ban. You can kind of use your bench to protect the Monstro deck a little bit. So ban the deck, bench the deck that has maybe access to good Monstro removal. And at that point, I think all of your decks can be very good at beating slower decks that don't really have good Monstro removal, because Ruby Sapphire is a great late game deck. Emerald Steel can very much let decks not get to the later stages of the game with cards in hand, and then Amber Amethyst can just win the game as soon as a Monstro sticks. So this is like one more way to go about this if those prerequisites are met. I think when you explained your lineup, I was also like, if Kiwi Birds is a deck, you could build like Churner Dogs plus Kiwi Birds plus Ruby Amethyst.
Sure, that's another very good viable like ink pairing to bring. Yeah,
and what I like about that is like all of those decks kind of have similar game plans, with like kind of aggressive questing, but also some more sustained threats. And what that doesn't necessarily mean all of those have the same matchup. They don't, but with all of them kind of having like similar game plans, that can often lead to them having a shared strength against one deck, which if you then leave open, you might be able to target and not let them get through the round.
Sure. How funny would it be if like this Monstro deck actually becomes tier 1 and then, you know, people bring it to Worlds and that's the deck that people bench? They're so scared of the OTK deck that they're like, just bench it.
That's one thing I wanted to talk about as well, which is so I'm in Hearthstone we always played best of 5 with one ban, so you actually brought 4 decks, and at that point the bans get a little bit more clearer, but I think even the banning, because it also happens simultaneously, will at times have mind games involved, right? Let's look at the obvious choice lineup that we are displaying here. Ruby Sapphire, Amber Steel, Green Purple. And now we're saying bench Ruby Sapphire. But what if you look at your opponent's lineup and you kind of you put yourself into their shoes and you think, if I was them, what deck would they be the most afraid of? What do I think they are going to be banning? And then if you come to the conclusion that there's a decent chance they might be banning your Amber Steel, then that suddenly means you have no reason to ban their Ruby Sapphire.
Yeah.
Because like you have Ruby Sapphire, which depending on how it's built might be okay in the mirror, and you have Green Purple, which is probably at least okay against Ruby Sapphire, and then you could, based on that, your ban could change. But then the same, like as soon as your opponent figures out, oh, if my opponent thinks I'm banning Amber Steel and they're no longer banning my Ruby Sapphire, I think that means they're banning that. Then I'm no longer banning my initial ban. So I think with like best of 5 or even best of 7, usually the bans become correct regardless of the mind gaming thing. But I think best of 3 is very prone and open to that. So I think that will very much be part of the world's competitors banning decisions at times.
Sure, makes sense. The next slide we're going to take a look at is this super sealed format. So just to explain to the viewers if you're not aware of it so far, players will get 4 set 5 packs, 4 set 6 packs, 4 set 7 packs, and 4 set 8 packs. They'll have 60 minutes to construct a 3 ink color restricted 50 card sealed deck. Players are allowed to change cards in their deck in between games in the match so long as they are within the initially submitted ink color trio from their original pool of cards. It's basically like a sideboard. And then at the end of each game, they have to go back to their originally submitted list. They can't keep the sideboarded cards in there. So I'm going to move forward to the next slide, and we're going to just kind of talk through our idea of this super sealed format. So Moyen, do you want to take it from where we kind of explain the maths? So 16 times 12, we've 192 cards to choose from, right?
Yeah. So with every card containing 12 packs, we have like 192 cards. Because I kind of immediately jumped at this because my first worry about this format was if it needs to give enough options to the players to actually test their deck building skills.
Yep.
And now I was looking at this, 192 cards. If there's the same amount of cards for each ink, that would mean 32 cards per ink. And then even so let's say you choose 3 inks, I think that might be one of the bigger decisions. Suddenly you have like 96-ish cards to choose your 50 card deck from. And I think to have anyone that's opened a bunch of packs, a lot of them are like not really playable in terms of their war power level. There's some that are like so synergy based that outside of that synergy you can't really play them. So if your deck's not built around this card, it doesn't really work. And when you filter out the cards that are like so weak or so synergy based that you can't really, like you wouldn't never really choose them in this format, then I'm slightly worried that the cards that people will be left with will like not be that much more than 50. As soon as you pick your ink combination, that I don't think there will be like that much deck building skill tested. Outside of that, I think because there is no completely even distribution of what ink a card is from in a pack, I think Kree mentioned to me earlier, the first 6 are always from the 6 different ink colors.
Yeah, that's from my experience of opening a lot of packs. If that's changed or whatever, please let us know down below. But we're also curious is there another determined distribution of inks in the rest of the 6? Because it's not like we know there's going to be another exact 6 from that, because I've seen, I've opened a pack where I've got like, a legendary Setu Mufasa, and then I've got a shiny legendary Setu Mufasa. So by that logic alone, then there's not going to be this split, the other 6 inks again throughout those remaining 6 cards. So yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So sorry, Moyen, continue.
No, of course. Yeah, so that was just my big worry. The other one was just from like I saw, in general, I think sealed coming to Worlds, as a viewer, I don't mind it. If I was participating, I would probably enjoy the challenge and like kind of get into it immediately. But at the same time, I can't help but feel like it's not entirely fair on the Worlds competitors to have like, this, you could, in a way you could say, this 3 triple deck constructed format. We never had that. So it's also like, this is also something new for them. But this is still constructed. It's just like testing a wider range of decks. Whereas bringing sealed to work, like having sealed be relevant for Worlds itself when it was never relevant in the lead up to Worlds, to me still feels slightly off. Like at the end of the day, I don't mind it that much. I think for the viewing experience it will probably be fine. But at the end of the day, we can't really judge it as much because we don't know how fun it is to watch, how fun it is for the players, how skill testing it is, because we've never had it in a competitive event, and it might go very well, but also we don't know that, and it feels a little bit strange that the biggest stage of the first year, the World Championship, is featuring this format. That's just kind of my 2 cents about that. But in general, so if we don't have a lot of options for our 3 ink colors, I think, how do you choose on what ink combination to run? I think if you have like a lot of cards, a lot more than 32 cards from a certain ink combination, you probably have more better options or more not bad options from those ink colors that might lead you for a certain way. But I think you also had an idea about what colors might be stronger in the format.
Yeah, I mean it's something that I was talking about with some friends at during the set champs this weekend about this format, and we're like, well, all the colors that play evasives is ruby, emerald, and amethyst, and in a sealed format. And I mean, of course, it's in the sealed format, but in general, we've talked about, sets 5 to set 8, because this will be, post rotation, having less removal. Suddenly, evasive cards, and there's not a lot of removal, they just become like super, super powerful, a lot more difficult for your opponent to deal with. So there's like this initial strategy, maybe, that if you happen to have like a decent amount of evasive cards, you just play this pairing. This doesn't mean you have to go like all in on the evasive package. Like, maybe it's common that you play 2 out of the 3 of these and pair it with another good one with like steel or amber or sapphire, whatever just the strongest cards are from that color. But this is a general idea that I think might do well enough. But again, it's so dependent on it's just all dependent on what cards you open, right? Because no matter what, I wouldn't just open cards and instantly play the whole evasive package, right? You still have to evaluate each individual card for their strength level. But if you've opened enough evasives, this is just something to keep in mind, that they're going to be particularly strong in this like kind of sealed meta where there's not a lot of like removal. Would you agree with that for the most part? Do you think that's like an interesting strategy to look at, or do you think that's something to just consider on the side? And like, I don't think it should be like your primary game plan, but it's something worth noting, at least, I think.
Yeah, that is for sure. I also think it's like important to not. Okay, so level 1 is evasives are good in this format. There's less removal. Evasives are always good in limited formats,
Sure.
in Lorcana. But I think all of them will be aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe like people will pick a lot of cards that are evasive on your turn.
Mm-hmm.
Like stuff that's good against evasives, I think will also be picked a lot. So I think you'll have to be at least careful to not like overpick a card, like a low power level card just because it is evasive.
Sure.
And still keep in mind like everything else that goes on in the Lorcana game. But yeah, I think in general it might just be that somewhat like, I remember my Ravensburger side event where I played sealed, and I had a crazy deck. That's really not that important now, but I played like Blue Fairy on 2, Shift Diablo on 2, stuff like that. I don't think I shifted, but I played it on 3, and then I kept playing Flood once. I had lots of evasive cards, and I was crazy. But then one game in the finale, my opponent just played like an Isabella Madrigal,
Mm-hmm.
in a game where I didn't draw my early evasive answers.
Yep.
Then Isabella proceeded to quest it for 4 turns.
Yep.
And the game
they won the game. Yeah.
So I mean that wasn't like the most fun gameplay experience. And I hope this like Super Sealed doesn't lead to experiences like that often. There's also the other side of things where it can lead to stalemates, and both of you have boards, but the person to quest first like kind of runs into unfavorable trades, and then both of them are kind of just like playing a card and passing until they finally quest with everything and maybe quest one more time. That's kind of what can happen a lot, I think, in Sealed. But honestly, I with all of the worries and everything that I'm mentioning, overall I'm still excited that okay, they have to play 3 decks. They have to play all these different ink combinations. They have to play sealed. It's like so many different angles of their TCG knowledge are being tested. And I think it's a good idea. I think it could be fun if we try to play this format.
We should try, yeah. I don't know if we'll have all the cards, because I don't think I can bring all my cards with me. Right?
Maybe we might have to proxy some if we don't get all the cards together.
Yeah.
Hope people won't hate us then. But,
we'll try our best. I think it would definitely be fun for sure. Okay, yeah, so that's pretty much it for this week's episode of the podcast. This weekend, myself and Moyen are traveling to Birmingham for the UK Games Expo to play in the last major Set 7 event on the Saturday. I am also playing the sealed events on the Friday and the Sunday, so that will be fun to see what that kind of sealed meta is like, even though that's not going to be the specific meta of the Worlds format, because they're going to have packs from set 5, 6, 7, and 8. But it'll be cool to evaluate some cards and see how the game plays. And then we'll jump into some Reign of Jafar stuff. I'm just really excited to sit down and watch Worlds. Hopefully with you, Moyen. We get to enjoy the event together. And of course, just looking forward to season 2 of DLCs once we get some news on it. Probably once Fabled rolls around, we'll hopefully have something started up. That'll be a good bit after Worlds has ended by then. Any final thoughts, closing thoughts, Moyen? I'm not going to spoil what I'm playing this weekend, but listen, all I'll say is people don't have to really guess what I'm playing. So, yeah.
I also have seal tickets, don't I? So I also
did you get seal tickets? I didn't think you did.
Oh, I thought I did. I'll check later.
Oh, nice.
But I hope I did. I'm looking forward to the expo, and I hope this episode wasn't too much theory, but I think it warranted all of this theory. I think these new formats are very, very exciting and interesting, and there's lots to talk about.
For sure. I think my only fear is a lot of this, at least for us, is really interesting, but maybe for a general audience, they're like, well, I'm never going to play this format, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. But it does. I mean, you should aspire to try and get to that stage, and maybe we'll never have this format again, but I think all of the theory behind it is interesting. So apologies, maybe we went into it a little bit too deep, but I mean, next week we'll have lots of cool stories to share from the expo. Obviously, we'll highlight the best performing deck lists. Next week will be a lot of fun because we'll have the event, but we'll also have hopefully a lot of really cool week 1 decks from Reign of Jafar as well. Awesome. So if you guys enjoyed this episode of the podcast, be sure to leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your local podcast platform. There's a video version of this available over on youtube.com/@PodcanaPodcast. Hit the subscribe while they're there. We also have all of the deck graphics and stuff over on the video version. Twitters are @Kawatech_CG and @Moyen_HS. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you guys in the next one.